Hello, everybody, and welcome to the April 12th, 2022 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. Okay, yep. We were just discussing before the recording started, not really anything on the agenda. I believe that 1.24.0 beta or RC.0 was released this week. If now's a good time to start doing testing if you're planning on adopting 1.24 release when it gets released. There shouldn't be that many changes or any changes between now and the final build. That's all I think I have for announcements today. Let me check contributor or the participants list. Yeah, as always, if there's anybody who's new to contributing and wants to introduce yourselves or say hi, get some help, now's the time to do that. But I think I've seen everybody on the participants list multiple times here, so we can skip that. And then we can go into agenda items. I don't have much to talk about. I think one thing that we'll note is, I think last time we talked about a PR to improve the performance on kubeproxy policy, or policy syncing. We were hoping to get that in 1.24. That was I actually filed an exception for that. That got denied. So we will work on merging that for 1.24.1 and then backport as appropriate. Is that, I don't see that on the list here. I'll add it to the agenda after the fact. David was the one who was working on that, so that's a pretty significant time savings for network to become ready after a new node comes online if there's a large number of services in the cluster. Arvind, do you want to give us a quick status update on that?
Yeah, so the no log viewer will not make 1.24, and we're targeting it now for 1.25. The main issue was with API review. It looks like they want the shape of the API itself to change. Tim Hawken was not really happy with specifying a path and a service. He does not want the user to even care about stuff like that, but rather have a generic query input. And you can give the name of a service as a query or a file name as a query, and the server needs to be smart enough to figure that out and make that right, sort of call as to whether to look at a journal or just, return a file. So that's one thing. The other thing is the way we are exchanging information between the between kubectl and kubelet is, I think, using an older style of doing things. We need to do this encoding and decoding into the API struct itself. So that's the other thing that came about. I think I got a review from Jordan Liggett about that yesterday. So given these kind of changes that we need to make, this doesn't make much sense for us to try and get an exception on this, given there's, I think, a little bit more work that needs to go in. So that's the update on that. Let me know if anybody has any questions.
Okay, thanks for the updates. Yeah, it seems like they keep moving the goalpost a little bit here, unfortunately. But I think should be in pretty good shape to merge this very early in 1.25. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's what I'm targeting for. Just get this merged as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And yet, yeah, given that I think the exception for this kubeproxy fixes was rejected with out of concern of stability, and this was testing only Windows code paths. I think that the chances of having an enhancement that touches the API surface, kubelet, and kubectl will probably have very, very little, if no chance, if any chance, of being admitted here too. So I think the best we can do is merge it as early as we can once the branch opens for new check-ins. Cool. Thank you for all your continued work and perseverance and on this feature.
Happy to help.
Yeah, I think it'll be super helpful for a lot of folks once it's available. And yeah. Okay, so I found the PR here. Anybody who's interested, there's a lot of details on that, on some of the time savings that we're able to have with these changes. And then there are some additional time savings with some additional OS updates, which will be coming out in the next couple of months. Lots more information in the issue and the link to PR. Jamie, was this you who added an update on the GMSA charts?
Yeah, so James did a little bit of help probably a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and I've finally been able to pull down his changes. I rebased off the latest main changes, and all the unit tests, but the last one, all the integration tests, but the actual chart deployment test passed. And if the chart deployment test fails because of a Go mod that works on the other 8 integration tests that do the same Go mod command. So once that gets resolved, I think we may be close to being able to get that merged in. I did also update to use the 0.4 image, 0.4.0, the newest one. So all those updates are in place. So it's getting close. And I'm also getting a few pings and like reports from people actually using it already. So that's been some good feedback to get incorporated in. So it's moving. If anybody's curious, just slow.
Okay, great. Yeah. I can maybe take a look at some of the Go mod issues.
It's the same exact command. It's just failing to pull on the last one. I have no clue. It works 7 or 8 times before. So it's just have to run it locally and try to debug it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it could be environmental, and we may be starting the GitHub Actions runner slightly different.
Yep.
But okay, yeah, that's great progress. And I'm glad to see that people are already using it, even though it hasn't been merged yet. It's, I think, a good indication that it's a worthwhile time investment. Yeah, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Jamie about that, or? All right, if not, Jay, I see you have some questions.
Hey, so right now for the kernel space proxy, you have to create the HNS network and the net firewall rule outside of kubeproxy before it starts on Windows. So I've just have my own automation that does this, but like normally I think what people do is they make these things on their own. Now, when you make this, I don't think there's a lot of opinions you might have in general about how to do this. Like, unless you're doing it like maybe in Azure or in some cloud, for most people in a local situation, just I think running, like, how do I do it? I think I give it a port. And that port is even in Calico, it's hard coded to 4789. And then you give it a, like you tell it whether you want to do an overlay, whether it's what type of HNS network and whether it's an overlay or not. So I'm failing to see whether there's a good reason why we couldn't just sort of create a network firewall rule in the kube proxy when it runs, and an HNS network, and then you could run it like you wouldn't need your CNI provider to do that for you. But I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm doing a very weird thing here because I'm trying to start the kube proxy on Windows without a CNI provider as a way to sort of specifically test its behavior outside of any other type of networking
So
that
isn't
might be
that
going on.
part of the reason why they boot the local gateway or the local host gateway stuff first? So kubeproxy can come up, because then once kubeproxy connects, Calico can go to Felix and then
Yeah.
get the information it needs. And so what Calico does, and we found this out the hard way, is that it actually sets up a rule that will route on the local host through its network that gets set up, just temporarily until things work. It's hard to describe. I got it in my head, but it's hard to talk about. So,
So
and
Calico, when it starts to talk to the Kubernetes API server, it
pulls
wants to do that
information.
through the internal service endpoint. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it'll
Okay.
do that to pull the Felix information, and then once the Felix info gets pulled down, it like configures the network all the way. And so we kind of ran across an issue with Calico specifically, where it makes the metadata call, like you're in AWS, it makes the AWS metadata call. And then of course that's kind of going to fail until you re-add the route back. And that's because it's going through like a proxy is not the right way to describe it, but it's basically proxying it through its network to call out through the local host. But then when you get your Calico network up, it'll start actually it'll add the rule back in to be able to call the metadata API in whatever cloud provider you're using. So, so that way it can detect if you're running in AWS or in Azure and set the correct information. So, this is a lot, and it's a word salad.
I don't know if I don't know. Are we talking about the same thing? I don't know.
Well, no, I'm talking about how Calico does it, because what you're proposing would solve that issue. Calico wouldn't need to do that itself. So I like the idea here, because there's some stuff that Calico kind of bootstraps itself, that if this was baked into like the kubeproxy or Kaping, then it wouldn't have a need to do that. And it would be easier to logic about.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's related. I was getting there. It's just
I mean, well, since you agree with me, I don't really even I'm just happy. So
I think it's a good idea. I think handling some of that stuff as upstream without the CNI, because lots of CNIs seem to do these weird shenanigans to be able to have the right stuff set up first to then actually configure itself the right way.
Yeah. So so what I do, it's 2 calls, and I just literally stole the calls from Calico. And I literally do the 2 things they did. And it's really funny, because if you look at the Calico bootstrap, actually the port 4789 is hard coded. And so is the address prefix and the gateway for the HNS network. So I don't even know how it works. So I'm kind of wondering, like, but yeah. So overall, there's no objection to the idea that kubeproxy could set up its own. And I feel like that aligns with what IPVS does. I mean, when you start a kubeproxy in IPVS mode, it's definitely going off and it's creating like a dummy IPVS firewall, which is very similar to the network architecture for Windows kernel space kubeproxy, where you have like a dummy device, whatever the hell it is, network thing. So I feel like there's like if we use IPVS as a archetype, then the idea would be we should have our own default logic for, if nothing is provided, we create a firewall rule and an HNS network that starts the kubeproxy in kernel space. That's kind of where I was going. So Jamie sounds like he's not against the idea, and yeah, okay.
One quick question: do we have all the information available to create the HNS network? Like, we need to know the pod splitter and the subnet range used for the HNS network, and then in the L2 bridge case, after we created the HNS network, we also have to create a bridge endpoint and other things. So would we also do all of that as well in kubeproxy?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't talk about the L2 bridge case because that's the other one, right? There's the overlay and then there's L2 bridge, and those are separate, right?
Right.
So there's a whole conversation about like, yeah, like if the kube proxy is going to do this, we need to plumb a few parameters into it. Like I mentioned, like right now when I do it, it's hard code these things, and I don't even know why we do 192. I assume that when people install Calico, I don't know what you all do, Jamie, but I assume when people install Calico, they just fork the Calico installation scripts and they have some parameterization to the address prefix and gateway.
We rewrote it all to be in Go.
Okay.
Got rid of all the
Exactly.
PowerShell.
Or they copy paste it all in the fucking Go. Okay.
We didn't copy paste anything. I wrote it from scratch in Go to follow the same logic that PowerShell does. So that way we don't have to have some of the PowerShell stuff running and NSSM is not involved.
Oh, that's cool, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't want it, by the way.
Well, I mean, maybe then we just steal it from you. Maybe we steal it from Rancher. So if that's all in RK2 or whatever, maybe we can just take that and libraryfy it or something. Okay.
I think so. My gut says you need something like KPI, so the kube proxy interface, KPNI, kube proxy network interface. How many more can we make around all this stuff?
Okay.
Like
What do you
make
mean?
a standard interface that people can use kube proxy to do the configs and network stuff, right? Like standardized interface, so any CNI can just plug into it on.
Well,
I think that,
what would the CNI plug into?
well, like it would know, like if you're going to set some of this stuff up, then it could query and get the information it needs, or if it wants to add endpoints or ports, because you got VXLAN, right? Which is not 4789, right? That's what, 68 something another, 67.
So you're thinking there should be an interface that allows a CNI provider to.
I'm just throwing that out there because
Okay.
all the CNI providers tackle this problem. Like we talked about how L2 Bridge tackles it slightly different versus Calico does their thing. We have Cilium coming, or Calico with eBPF.
Mhm.
Like it would be nice if there was a standard way for them to be able to like not have to like you could bootstrap a cluster without CNI being active, but then it can have the hooks like what you're proposing here. I think just me throwing it out there.
Something. Okay.
Yeah, just something standard, so that way.
So here's what I'll do. I'll file an issue upstream, and then I'll tag David and Jamie on it, and I'll write up what we sort of talked about here, and we can talk about adding this in at least in KPNG.
Let's call it K and I. Let's make it even more confusing.
Yeah, I mean, that can't. I'm kind of confused which direction you want that interface to go in, though. So, but we could talk about it in a little bit.
Well, I'm just looking at it as if kube proxy is going to handle, like Caping's going to handle some of this stuff, which I think is good. How much does the CNIs need to know? Because Calico kind of creates a lot of this bootstrap stuff and then switches over to like its own thing. But if you follow Calico, it also has this bad habit of deleting everything when it boots up. If you ever noticed that in the scripts,
okay,
it'll delete all HNS networks and then create theirs from scratch every single time it reboots.
Oh, Calico does that? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. That's in the Windows service. So for, I think, the Node Windows service. So that way, because it doesn't know the state of HNS networks. So I'm probably getting way too off in the weeds here, but I was just thinking if kube proxy is going to handle some of that, then we'd want to maintain HNS networks and not blow them all away. Right. So yeah. So if it could find a way to be like, here's the known good ones you don't need to touch.
Or at least check for them. And
yeah. It's very.
I mean, for Azure CNI, we did the same thing where when a node comes back up, we have to pretty much reset network state, which involves also tearing down all the containers. So
so
being able to preserve some of that state somewhere and just rewire things up instead of tearing everything down and bringing it back up fresh, and could have some benefits.
I'm going to say the reason we should add this is that if kubeproxy and kernel sprays could bootstrap itself from a networking perspective, then CNIs wouldn't have to start it before they themselves started up Thus, we would eliminate a circular dependency in the Windows networking startup chain.
That's interesting that Azure CNI does it. I mean, it's common enough that people do that. I don't know if Flannel recommends doing that or not, but I'm sure it probably does. It's just, it's because the unknown state, right? Which I'd be concerned if you implemented an HNS network for Kaping and then you booted Calico, it would delete it, right? So it'd have to check and recreate it. Like, I'm just spitting out a bunch of stuff now. I'll be quiet.
Yeah.
I think in Flannel, the Flannel daemon creates the network first, and the Flannel CNI knows how to use that network.
We'll talk with Jamie Phillips. I think I got your GitHub IDs wrong, but I don't, whatever. Okay, cool. I filed the issue. If folks want to see concretely what I'm talking about, I'll put a link. I have a blog post where I just have my personal development instructions for how I work on the kernel space for KPNG. If folks want to look at it there, they can go to it and see what specifically I'm talking about. Hey, David, since you're here, does anybody from your group want to pair up on the kuproxy Windows kernel space stuff this week? I'm happy to sort of get you all ramped up on it. Let me
talk to Sravanth, yeah.
Ah, okay.
I think there is one person. I don't know if they have already started or not.
Cool. All right, let me know. I'll be around. That's it for me.
Well, yeah, I don't see anything else on the agenda either. So unless anybody has anything to discuss, we can give everybody a couple minutes back.
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording then. Thanks everybody, and see everybody next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye, folks.
some good discussions, even though we didn't have anything on the agenda to begin with. So
It just grew.
yep.
See ya. All right, let's catch up a little bit.